You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Greetings, listeners to Ronda's Radio Journal, and this is a continuation of shows in which I talk about books of mine, which the publisher, Dr. Sebastian Mahfoud of En Route Books, called vintage books. They're older books that I wrote years ago, but are still available, and in fact, they're on sale just now in such a way you could get the book for free if you just pay the postage. So this book is called Quotable Saints. And one of the reasons I put together this book is I would sometimes see on shelves around how non-Catholic Christians have these books of Bible quotes, like little books to carry around, and they were organized by the feeling that you had, what to read from Scripture when you're feeling low, what to read when you're feeling afraid, what to read when you're feeling angry. So since I love reading the saints, I found quotes from the saints on all these topics. And so I'm just going to read them to you. Each one I have the negative and then how you go to a positive state, and then you go to the chapter and you see what the saints said about this subject. So I have going from ambition to contentment, from anger to peacefulness, annoyance to patience, bewilderment to trust, complaining to gratitude, confusion to contemplation, death to life everlasting, delusion to truth, despair to hope, disorder to self-control, distance to intimacy with God, doubt to faith, emptiness to fullness, fear to courage, greed to simplicity, harshness to gentleness, idleness to good works, injustice to generosity, lack of love to love, mediocrity to zeal, over-attachment to liberation, pride to humility, rebellion to obedience, resentment to forgiveness, sadness to joy, self-hate to self-love, self-reliance to prayer, sin to repentance, temptation to perseverance, uncertainty to wisdom. So doesn't that sound great? Wouldn't you like to have all those better things instead of the negative opposites? Wouldn't we all like to be that way? So I'm going to read you some of my favorites from the book, and just to get you into it and to see how much you would like to get this free book, so that you could just, open the book whenever you have these feelings, or just open it at any time and see what you find. So, this is in the chapter Ambition to Contentment, and it's from St. Thomas More. And I'm going to read these ones slowly so you really get it, because I found rereading them again after 30 years, it's still very important for me to read, even much later in life. What men call fame is, after all, but a very windy thing. A man thinks that many are praising him and talking of him alone, and yet they spend but a very small part of the day thinking of him, being occupied with things of their own. Isn't that funny and cute and real? Okay. Here's one from Venerable Jose Escrivá. In those around you, he's admonishing someone. In those around you, you don't see brothers, you see stepping stones. Ta-da. That's surely ambition versus contentment for sure. Okay. And here's one on anger, from anger to peacefulness. A man, this is from St. Francis de Sales. A man giving to fasting thinks himself very devout if he fasts, although his heart may be filled with hatred. Much concerned with sobriety, he does not dare to wet his tongue with wine or even water, but won't hesitate to drink deep of his neighbor's blood by detraction and calumny. Do you know the difference between detraction and calumny, by the way? I didn't know that, but I found it out only 10 years ago. I was reading a list for Lent of sins you should go to confession for, and I saw this sin detraction, and I looked it up. I didn't know what it was. Okay, so calumny is the big sin, often a mortal sin, when you say an untruth about a person in order to get them into big trouble, as in someone lying in court about what someone did that could get them in jail. That's calumny. But detraction is saying something true, but that other people don't need to know, which will lead to them disliking the person or disapproving of the person. And even though it's true, there's no reason for everyone to know about this. And that's called detraction. So he describes this as drinking deep in your neighbor's blood when we do this. And mea culpa, it's a big sin of mine that I often confess. And I've understood why I do this. I feel frustrated and annoyed by someone. But I can't force them to do what I want them to do or be the way that I want them to be. But when I'm describing them sarcastically to someone else in a gossipy way, then I feel superior over them. See, I'm judging them. So it's not that what I'm saying isn't, everyone says who has this fault, I've noticed, is everyone says, but it's true. But that's not the point. We're supposed to love our enemies even, no less people who just happen to annoy us. Okay. So here is another one. This again is Jose Escrivá, Venerable Jose Escrivá. In case you don't know him, he's the Spanish founder. He was a Spanish priest who founded the movement Opus Dei, which is all over the world. And this is what he says. Why lose your temper? This is in the chapter still on anger to peacefulness. Why lose your temper if by doing so you offend God, annoy other people, give yourself a bad time, and have to find it again in the end? It's a joke. You lose your temper where you have to find it again because you can't just be spluttering all day. Okay. Now this is in the chapter on annoyance to patience. And it's by St. Louis Marie de Montfort. Do as the storekeeper does with his merchandise. Make a profit on every article. Suffer not the loss of the tiniest fragment of the true cross. It may only be the sting of a fly or the point of a pin that annoys you. It may be the little eccentricities of a neighbor, some unintentional slight, the insignificant loss of a penny, some little restlessness of soul, a light pain in your limbs. Make a profit on every article as the grocer does, and you will soon be wealthy in God. Well, how do we make a profit over those little crosses? Is a practice I learned when I first became a Catholic when I was in my 20s, early 20s. is to offer up all these little crosses and annoyances all day long. And say, I offer the little sting of this fact that someone didn't smile at me when I passed them in after church, after Mass today, anything that annoyed you or upset you slightly, to offer that up for the conversion of all the people in your family that you're hoping will convert, or some other good cause. So that's how you can make a profit on anything that happens to you. Okay. Here is one for Blessed Junipero Serra. Blessed Junipero Serra is the great Franciscan who helped bring the faith to all the people in the Native Americans, especially, and everyone along the coast of California. He was a missionary to Mexico, and they sent him up the coast of California. And look at what he writes about, I have it under the chapter, Bewilderment to Trust. In the novitiate, I was almost always ill, and so small of stature that I was unable to reach the lectern. Now, you imagine most men like to be strong and tall, not little and weak. And he was little and weak, and yet he became one of the greatest missionary saints of all time. So, we have this, it's for men to be weak and small is like for a woman to be fat and ugly. It's that hard on men if they can't be big and strong. Okay, I was unable to reach the lectern, nor could I help my fellow novices in the necessary chores of the novitiate because he was sick. However, with my profession, that is when he made his vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience as a Franciscan, I gained health and strength and grew to medium size. I attribute all this to my profession, that is, all this to his vows, for which I give infinite thanks to God. So these quotations are so interesting. Remember, you can get this book for free and have it for the rest of your life if you're willing to pay the postage, and I'll tell you how to do that at the end of the program. Page 32. This is, again, Bewilderment to Trust. And this is just a funny little sentence which you could repeat with, and it would help everyone around you. He says, this is Blessed Louis Guanella. I worry until midnight, and from then on I let God worry. Isn't that cute? Here is one from St. Louise de Marillac. And this is about going from complaining to gratitude. So she was a helper of the poor. She was the woman saint who helped St. Vincent de Paul, who founded the whole Helpers of the Poor that became all over the world, St. Vincent de Paul Society. And she was the woman saint who was his helper and companion. So she was tending to the sick, she says. If there is likeliness of illness leading to death, I will do my utmost to make them offer up acts of faith and hope and confidence, and I will try to give them some knowledge of the grandeur, beauty, and love of God, and the joy of possessing Him eternally, and the glory of the blessed. I often like to say this to people when they have acute sufferings and long-term sufferings. They're very, very heavy. I say, do the math. If you were tortured every day of your life, but one day you're going to be infinitely happy for all eternity, wouldn't it be worth it? Do the math. How many days are an infinite, eternal number of days of joy in heaven? If we follow the Lord, He promises us that. Okay. Page 42, Teresa of Avila, and this is under the chapter Confusion to Contemplation. And I love this quote. She says, I had a serious fault. If I began to realize that a person liked me and I took to him myself, I would grow so fond of him that my memory would feel compelled to revert to him, and I would always be thinking of him without intentionally giving any offense to God. She was a cloistered nun, sister. But when once I had seen the great beauty of the Lord in a vision, I saw no one by comparison on whom my thoughts wished to dwell. So we don't want to pray for, I would say, we don't want to pray for visions as such in order to be famous because we had visions, but we want to pray, Jesus, give me such a sense of your beauty that I will not be so fascinated with human persons in such a way as to take my mind off you. Okay. Page 63. Here is from Venerable Charles de Foucauld. Now, Charles de Foucauld, you may not know who he is. He's a wonderful saint for our time because he was a terrible, terrible sinner, and he was a Frenchman who went to Africa in order to settle, colonize Africa, not to be a minister. But anyway, he had a huge conversion experience. Then he spent the rest of his time in deep prayer as a hermit. And this is what he says. However wicked I may be, however great a sinner, I must hope that I should go to heaven. You, Jesus, forbid me to despair. And then from Conchita Cabrera de Armida. Conchita Cabrera de Armida is a Mexican saint of the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, who was a grandmother but was a great mystic, and Jesus dictated her more than 100 books, and someday she'll be a doctor of the church, I think. This is what she says about despair. Suddenly, when the soul is engulfed in pain, at these very moments, almost of despair, there comes a gentle breeze, changing, parching, arid suffering into a pleasant freshness, without other desire than to please the beloved, God, without dreaming any more about the pleasures of future good. So again, suddenly when the soul is engulfed in pain at these very moments almost of despair, there comes a gentle breeze, changing, parching, arid suffering into a pleasant freshness, without other desire than to please the beloved, without dreaming any more about the pleasures of future good. Okay, it happened that when I was assembling this book 30 years ago, I was simultaneously reading all these writings of Jose Escrivá, the founder of Opus Dei. So I put him at the end of each section, some quote from him. This is on From Distance to Intimacy with God. Anything that does not lead you to God is a hindrance. Root it out and throw it far from you. Okay, and this is a chapter on how to go from doubt to faith, what to think about. And here is what he says. and it's very short, but I think it's so good. This is Venerable Francis Lieberman. Do things simply, without too much analysis. Many people like me, especially older people, when you retire, you have a lot of free time. So you're not rushing. In the past, when you were very busy, say if you were working full-time or or the mother of a household full of kids, you were busy all the time. Then you didn't have time to analyze every little stupid thing that was going on. But then when you have a lot of free time, when you're retired, you start analyzing things like, should I mop the floor this morning or this afternoon? And he says, do things simply. And I just love that. Okay. And here is the last one I will be reading to you before I tell you how to get this wonderful book. This is From Sadness to Joy, and it's from Saint Isaac Jogues, the martyr, a French martyr in Canada. What is suffered is known only to one for whose love and in whose cause it is pleasing and glorious to suffer. Now, of course, that's very hard for us to swallow. You don't see God. If we saw, sometimes when I'm suffering something that's very painful, I look up at my favorite pictures of Jesus and I see his compassionate eyes, and then I feel, well, I'm going to offer this suffering to you, Jesus, and it's all worth it. So those are some quotations from this wonderful book that I assembled. And I say it's wonderful because I just assembled them, but the quotes are just terrific, and they're from the saints. So it's called Quotable Saints, and you can get it if you put in www.rondachervin.com, and you know how to spell my name because it's right on the radio show that you're watching. So it's Ronda with no H. So it's rondachervin.com, and you'll go to En route Books and Media, and it will tell you a list of these books that are being given for free to anyone who wants them if you pay the postage, and how to do it. So God bless you all. Quote the saints, read the saints. You don't have to get huge 500-page lives of the saints to quote the saints, because you can find them right in this book. God bless you all.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.